here at the virtual Ant Wacky Studios. I am D, and with me today are my fellow compatriots. We are going to discuss some things about music, particularly bands and really like frontmen who have come and gone in bands. Is the original guy or girl, were they better, or is the replacement better? We are about to debate these things today, and everybody's going to come from this from different perspectives, from different musical backgrounds. So without further ado, how are you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good. I'm pumped.
I'm Ryan, and hey, it's another day, man. Can't complain when you get to see another one.
So where should we start? What band should we start with?
Well, I would actually point to the band that started this discussion, and I know you guys are going to say it started with other bands, but the one that got me started on this was the recent replacement of the lead singer for Linkin Park. And the thought process I had in relation to it for Linkin Park specifically is you had a lead singer who passed away, and then they had a long hiatus. And the question is whether or not do you keep them. A lot of the questions that people had was, do you keep the name of the band when you've changed the sound? And arguably, they haven't changed the sound. They've just changed the singer that was involved in the band. And it is different. And, it's like, oh, it's not doing justice. But the band was made up of many individuals. It was a much bigger thing than that. And the tone and the sound has not significantly changed if you actually compare it to some of the other recordings. So for me, that was the root of the thing. And then it made me start looking at other bands in relation to what was out there.
So definitely, a lead singer change can incur a whole sound change. In some cases, it doesn't. Does it become something where do they find greater success or continued success afterwards? For somebody to keep a similar sound, for instance, is the band Alice in Chains. They picked back up with a different singer. For the most part, kept the same kind of sound. But then you might get something, somebody like an AC/DC did much of the same. But then you can get a band that goes in a whole different direction. Take, for instance, Genesis. They had Peter Gabriel for 6 albums. After that, Phil Collins takes over. They see greater success. Their sound goes in a different direction.
And they go on to probably bigger success than they had. Commercial success. I mean, whether or not you like the music tone is a whole other issue, because I know there are people who are very partial to old Genesis versus new Genesis, but they definitely went on to bigger success afterwards. AC/DC is another one. I mean, I grew up listening to post Bon Scott, not pre Bon Scott, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's this whole section of older music, and it sounds different, but it's still good. It's still relevant. That's not where I expected you to go. I actually expected you to jump on the Judas Priest one, like early. Like, because
I'm full of surprises.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think this topic has like many layers, and it's really like subjective at the end of the day. Like when you say like success, does that mean like commercial success, artistic success, creative success? Because like if you're judging on album sales and streaming or whatever, I guess that's how they would deem commercial success. But like, here's an instance. We were just bagging on them. We were kind of bagging on them. At least I was the other week. Motley Crue, when they replaced their frontman.
Yeah.
And I don't care. That 1994 album, you can stack that up against all the other albums in their catalog, and it still beats it, in my opinion, hands down.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, this was a guy that was like an actual real musician, could play guitar, harmonica, was actually a real freaking songwriter, not just up there, doing a lot of posturing. And but yeah, I mean, like instances like that. But then again, at the end of the day, because Vince was the original guy and he was the one that helped them establish that image, it's like they had to get him back. So it's like at the end of the day, these record companies at the time, it's like it's all about the dollar. So, I mean, there's like a lot of bands where they've had like replacements. Anthrax, for instance.
Oh yeah, they've cycled quite a bit.
Yep.
We talked about Priest, and I was huge Priest fan, and I was excited when they had a new singer come out, but I think like at the time, that was what, about 97.
Yeah.
I think around that time, I think I was just excited there was a new Priest album coming out. I think that was the big thing.
Yeah.
It was like, even though I was like, well, because I had just like really gotten into them. So then like after hearing the new guy, Tim Owens, come in, and I like listen to both of them now, it's like, even if I like look at both their stuff, I still prefer Rob Halford over, Owens. I think it's just because of the screaming vocals. It's like, okay, you got it, man, but it's like I find him to be just a little excessive.
Yeah.
Just a little
unrefined, or too, actually probably too refined would be my argument. And I think that's one of the problems that I have with in general albums. The longer a band goes on, is the albums get too refined, and you end up, I mean, this is a completely different topic, but the albums get too refined. Well, sometimes when they're looking at a later album and they're having to replace a singer, they're looking for somebody with that refined sound that fits with what they're angling for. And AC/DC strikes me as one that didn't do that, because instead they went with a dude who has an unconventional voice compared to what you would expect for even compared to his predecessor. I mean, there's just that difference in tone. So those kind of things.
If you have to pick between one, who do you prefer, Bon Scott or Brian Johnson?
I mean, my first album was Back in Black, so like for me, that was the learning lesson. To be honest, I think the songs are better written. In that, I kind of break AC/DC into three phases: early, middle, and late. And the early part, there are some good songs in there, but I think the middle songs are actually the better written ones. And then their late ones are the ones where it just felt like they had achieved like that worldwide fame, and it was kind of not as well put together. It felt half-hearted. I say kind of the same thing about Metallica, that you have that early, middle, and late, and that middle part is the part that is good. But honestly, Metallica, I think even their early stuff was astounding. So to break it down into that, I think they had a good early and middle, and their late has just been, I don't know. People would say, oh, it's a money grab. Well, they're trying to put out music. It's just maybe they've lost the thing that drives them, because they have money now. They don't, they're not. I think music arises from a place of angst, or a moment, a feeling, an emotion, something, which I think all good art does arise from that. And finding somebody who replaces a singer or a musician in the band that then has that same kind of quality and embraces that, I think is important. So
I definitely think it comes down to pushing the boundaries, trying to grow as a musician. I think that's where a lot of bands end up, even when they were switching singers, is that maybe they got into a comfort zone where they were pumping out the same thing over and over again. AC/DC, I feel that way about. They definitely just kind of went cookie cutter and punched something out with their name on it, and people bought it. But take a band like Faith No More, major difference between when they had Chuck Mosley and then Mike Patton. But
Mike
even over
Patton
the years,
of nature. I mean, like,
yeah, yeah.
Station. That's all I gotta say. So.
And think about how they continue to push themselves artistically. You can go back and the real thing was written with Chuck Mosley. Angel Dust all of a sudden is a whole other matter. And then you have King for a Day, which becomes almost lounge music with some interspersed madness in it. Each time they tried to recreate themselves in a different direction, almost like the Beatles, where the Beatles tried to do different albums over the years. And I think that's what's kept them interesting to me.
To be honest, they went down a route that I didn't continue following, but that the ability to do that makes them a more interesting musical component to a collection than it would be to have the same thing over and over and over again. If you harken back to things like the Kinks or the Rolling Stones, or I would say Aerosmith, but their collection is very spotty. But if you go back to even Led Zeppelin, I mean, you listen to different Led Zeppelin albums there, but there's definitely Led Zeppelin is my worst example because I think there is kind of a similar feel between them. But like those others, I'm going through the Stones collection, going all the way from the beginning through the end, and they are like a blues band who develop into a rock band. And it's, to be honest, their blues stuff is awesome. It's right around the turn of the 80s when they turn into a real rock band that I really think their collection suffers. And so those kind of things. But that really has nothing to do with per se with the change of leadership, but it does involve how their sounds develop and new individuals in there. I mean, Anthrax is a perfect example. You take the albums before Sound of White Noise and then Sound of White Noise, it is completely different. Yeah. It's also very cleaned up. If you listen to Sound of White Noise and you listen to Persistence of Time has a roughness to it. Sound of White Noise sounds like it's been processed. And I mean, you're going to have people who attracted to it or not. We've been focusing, I think, a lot on bands where I think the change of musician has succeeded. How about times when it's failed?
Well, and that's like where I was talking about the whole subjective thing, because like look at Black Sabbath and look at Van Halen. Both of those bands had for instance, Van Halen, you went from David Lee Roth to Sammy Hagar and then Gary Cherone. And it's like, and by the time Gary Cherone showed up, you felt bad for the guy, because it was like, here's a guy trying to follow behind two giants, and it's just going to be an uphill battle. And I think he made a valiant effort. There's just no way. I mean, somebody was going to bitch in that crowd with the Van Halen crew. I mean, I personally, like, if this could probably get me excommunicated in some circles, but I always preferred Hagar over Roth. I just think
you're excommunicated. We are banishing you to the island of bad music. I'm not going to disagree with you. Like, I think if sitting around listening to it, the Roth stuff is entertaining, but it is a
lot of posturing.
Yeah, and Hagar, it just in many ways, I think the refinement helps to highlight how good they actually are as a band. Van Halen was, to be honest, never a band that was on my radar. It was not one that I jump to. And having listened to them later in life, I see the difference in the tone and everything else, and I mean, there's definitely something there to appreciate for what's there. But
I will side with the Van Hagar camp, but I'm also going to agree with some of the own self-criticism that the Van Halen brothers have had of their time with him. Is that sometimes his lyrics could be a little less than adult. He had a lot of lyrics like a song about Amsterdam. It was all about getting high.
Yeah.
So they did feel a little bit bad about stuff like that, but some of their best music also came out.
they recorded "Hot for Teacher."
True. I think there was a different energy level when they went from Roth to Hagar. I think it was a lot more adolescent, obviously, with Roth. Going to Hagar, it was kind of more down to business. I'm always going to feel like OU812 is probably their best overall album, even though it's one of their more laid back ones. Gary Sharon coming in, they definitely did something original with him. Did not really meet the expectations of what the fans had, and even when they went back to Roth for a different kind of truth, it was like that ship had sailed. Even bringing him back, it wasn't enough to get people back on their bandwagon. The energy just wasn't there anymore.
So that highlights a big question. Should you, if you are planning a significant change of tone, should you can the band name and start over? I mean, Zeppelin did it. They separated and never recorded again under the Zeppelin tagline.
Look at Sabbath. Remember, like how they had Ozzy, right, starting out, and then when Dio came along and replaced him, and of course Sabbath has had numerous singers over the years, but the two main ones were Ozzy and Dio.
Yeah.
But when Dio joined the band, when they released Heaven and Hell, it was Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. Now that for something happened to where I guess like Sharon, got the rights to the name or something.
Yeah.
And said that that Sabbath was Ozzy, Geezer, Iommi, and Ward. And so the lineup featuring Dio, they were forced to change their name to Heaven and Hell to differentiate between, the Sabbath lineup, the Dio lineup and the Ozzy lineup. And I just thought that was kind of BS because everybody knows it's basically Sabbath. You know what I mean? And
but if that introduces if the individual is still alive, I mean, a lot of the ones that actually, I don't want to say a lot of the ones we've covered. A lot of the ones we started with were ones where, singers died. Linkin Park, AC/DC, Queen. I'm trying to think who else we had threw in there. A lot of those, Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots. You have all these ones where the lead singers have died and the band still goes on. In many ways, in a lot of those situations, if they're not, in my personal opinion, I think if they're not putting out new music and they're not attempting to carry on with where they intend to go, it's not the same band. And it might depend on how important that the person is to the band of whether or not they can continue. For me personally, and when I keep coming back to Linkin Park, I think the thing that surprises me, and I was like a passive fan of them, but I don't think I realized how important Shinoda actually was to writing the songs and the lyrics and singing and doing a lot of the background work on it. And that, yes, Chester was the front man, but Shinoda was doing a lot of the legwork. So even with losing Chester, they lost that sound, but they've added a new sound that still sounds like theirs because they've kept the core of the songwriting. With other bands, that may be part of the crux of it, that they've lost that component. And I mentioned Anthrax and how there's that clear dividing line. The tone of the songs changed, the structure of the song changed. Even though it's more processed, the songs sound more mature. And you were talking about the difference between David Lee Roth and Hagar, and then going to Sharon. They were trying to grow up, and people didn't want to embrace it. They wanted their childhood. Maybe that's what affected them.
There's a old analogy. Well, it's a question of, if you replace over the years every part of a boat, is it still the original boat? Did Metallica cease to be after Burton died? Is that really where Metallica ended at? Are they just a logo in name only going forward? I guess that's a question of renaming bands. What is it? Take Megadeth. I mean, Megadeth, I think Dave Mustaine's the only member of Megadeth left. Everybody else has changed. So is it still Megadeth?
Well, that's always been his show, though, since day one. He runs that band like a dictatorship. Whatever what Dave says goes, basically, is what I've read and gathered.
Yeah, but you could say the same thing about the Foo Fighters. I mean, and not say that he's running it like a dictatorship, but if Dave Grohl goes, you can call yourself Foo Fighters all you want. But the main strength of the band, the core of it, is gone. And I think that's probably the big thing, is who are the power brokers in the band? Who's writing the music? Who's writing the lyrics? Who's coordinating all of that together? And I think with a lot of bands, especially ones that have lost lead singers, I come back to Queen. Queen's been around. They've had how many people standing in front of them to replace Freddie Mercury? And they're still playing old Freddie Mercury stuff. And none of anything that they are recording beyond that is not getting any press time or interest or release, because even though whoever they have in there has been good, I mean, I've seen the roster of people that they've had churning through as lead singer. They've had some really good people in there as lead singer, but it's just not Queen.
Not ready.
Yeah. And so I think there are certain things that are unrecreatable. And is that a fault of us as the fans, or is that a fault of us as the band?
Good question. Great music has come out of Journey, but for a lot of people, Ariel Pineda is not Journey. Steve Perry is Journey.
Yeah. Yeah. You place the pieces, and what do we expect? And people had that same worry about Genesis. Peter Gabriel's gone. Genesis is done. And they went looking for a lead singer and ended up turning to the drummer, which is unusual. I mean, how many bands do you know where the drummers are the lead singer? I mean, even Ringo, when he went solo, he had this huge band around him, and he didn't necessarily always sing on all those songs. So, but
you got some bands though that are just kind of an anomaly. Like, look at Mastodon. They have 3 singers in their band, and it's like the drummer sings, one of the guitar players sings, and the bass player sings, and the other guitar player just plays guitar. But it's like you have 3 different voices, 3 different styles, and it kind of makes you think like, wow, not to jinx anything, but what if something were to happen there, and like they lose one of them, is it still the same band? I mean, because Mastodon is a unique entity when it comes to their kind of hard rock music, and they've been around for a minute, but just kind of makes you think, with like that band has like so much going on in their sound.
I think there may be actually a parallel to that, and that is Bare Naked Ladies on the pop circuit. A band with primarily 2 lead singers, and a lot of people recognize Stephen Page as the primary lead singer, but still 2 lead singers, and they either kick him out or ask him to leave. Either way, he exits, and yes, they can still put the music together, and yes, it still sounds like them, but there is an essence that is lost to that, which in many ways they probably should have replaced that sound to companion and replicate those sounds when they do go in concert. Even if it is on like a guest basis, like a touring band, even if in studio they do something separate, but they should have done something in relation to that, because they don't have the vocal range or the ability to handle their catalog. And I think that's kind of what Linkin Park was looking at, is we need somebody who can move us forward sound wise, but also handle our past catalog. Do I think she handles the past catalog great? No, but is it different enough and new enough that we now are listening to something different than what we heard before, and we can differentiate it from band A to band B? And should they have changed name? I don't know. So
I think a band that may have kind of cracked the code on doing that, actually 2 bands, is for instance the band Ghost. I can't say I'm a Ghost fan, but every couple of years they rotate out their lead singer. One comes in to replace the prior one. It keeps, I guess it kind of shows some sort of a passage, almost like a royalty going from a king to a prince. Everything's moving along so that it becomes perpetual. Trans-Siberian Orchestra does something kind of like that. There's actually different touring units of Trans-Siberian Orchestra. People go and it's the brand name that they're going for. It's not for a specific singer. They probably can't even name any of the members of the band because there's such a rotation under that banner.
To be honest, I don't think I knew that Trans-Siberian Orchestra had a singer, because I think everything I've ever heard from them has been instrumental.
They definitely do have singers.
I actually thought you were going to go with Iron Maiden, a band who has consistently they've changed lead singer like 4 or 5 times.
They've had about 5 different singers. One of their past singers, Paul Diano, he died recently. So,
but Dickinson's been the big guy there.
Yeah, Bruce Dickinson replaced Paul Diano, and Bruce came along. He pretty much, became the golden goose. And when he left and they had that Blaze Bailey come in to replace him, it's kind of like that thing of like, you don't want to be the guy that follows the guy. Because that poor guy, man, he really got put through the ringer.
Well, it's the same thing that happened with Van Halen and Sharon. I mean, you're following what everybody perceived of as a successful run, and then you're getting thrown into that.
Are you guys familiar with the latest on Soundgarden?
No. What do you have going on that?
Basically, the rest of the band on Soundgarden, they're carrying on with the new singer. It's female, and they're going under the name Nude Dragons.
I do know that Cornell's daughter, I saw something about her performing the other day. I don't know if maybe she has some role in that or not.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, check that out. Well, on that note, we have things possibly to talk about in the future. Is there anything you guys like to wrap up at this point? Anything you think we haven't covered?
Maybe one thing we didn't touch on is how important is it to a band's legacy or their sound who they select as a producer? Because that
is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother bag of worms, because that gets into my whole argument of overproduction versus underproduction.
Correct.
So, D, what you got for us? Anything?
I'll probably think of something after we get off of here, but no, I'm like crickets.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up with one final quote from Mike Pat. Station.
That's actually not like. Well, no, technically he did say it.
He did when he got out of the. He did.
That's Jim Martin.
Jim Martin. Oh God, I screwed up. God.
Well, he does get to say station on the song that they did.
Okay, no, you're right. It's Jim Martin. Boston. That's why we do live recording. Just to watch. Anyway, the quote that Grinch.